I go by the name of Barakah as opposed to my family name, which is Edward Sanders. I'm very proud of my family name. The name Barakah signifies a change, a rebirth in my life. It means blessings. My life is full of blessings in spite of some of the serious mistakes I have made in the past. I am 64 years old, will be 65 in January. I spent 43 and a half years in Michigan prison. I went to prison in 1975 and I returned home in 2017 in July. It was just before I went in, just after my 17th birthday, and came home just before my 60th birthday. When my mother and father separated, we moved over off of 12th Street. We was living on 12th Street at the time of the 1967 riot. At that time, I used to go to school with Aretha's two sons, Edward and the other kid that's named after his father, Reverend Franklin. We took and went to Thurko Elementary together. I can remember at lunchtime, we would take and go over to their grandfather's house and have lunch in the backyard. We would take and go down in the basement, and we used to take and go down there and take and play on their instruments and take and have our lunch and so forth. And there were, and his grandfather's church was literally down the street from where we lived at on Philadelphia. And one of her sons, I shared the same name. My name is Edward, his name was Edward, and there was another kid named Edward that the three of us, or the four of us, used to take and hang out together. And that kid got raped. He got kidnapped, raped, and murdered with another child. And they found both of these children dead. And I can remember how hurt all of us was there. We all feel that there was a sense of death, and there was a lot of hurt and pain in that neighborhood. And then it's obvious the pain that followed that on 12th Street with the riot. And the riot happened right on our doorstep. Everyone knew someone that was killed there in Detroit. The reality of that is today, the marks there on 12th Street is still evident today as it was in 1967. I grew up in that neighborhood. It has left an impression on me. Even though I maintain my innocence today, I was convicted not as a principal, as assessor. I was said to have took and told someone to commit an act, okay? And I never done that. I never done that. When the police interrogated me, they said, we know that you haven't killed anybody, but we know that you know who did. And in my belligerence, in my youth, I became belligerent with the law enforcement. And they promised me, we'll make sure you do a whole lot of time. And they done just that. They done just that out of my belligerence to them. What it means to commit a crime as a youth, or to commit wrong as a youth, it means that one day you will grow out of that folly. You will grow out of that spontaneous behavior of being thoughtless to a responsible person. That type of sentence will tell you that society, everyone that you live with here on this earth, is incapable of forgiving you. Everyone on this earth is incapable of forgiving you. That's what that sentence means. They witness people's going from having their youth to taking and watching them grow old in prison and die. And then eventually they become that. But they only do it after having been in prison sometimes as many as 50 plus years. I apologize. This is my lived experience. This isn't something that I read about. This is something that I have lived, and it's not easy. When I went to the parole board for the first time after I served something like maybe 7.5 years, the parole board member said to me, There's nothing in this file that said you did anything more than the prosecutor's witness other than the fact that you didn't testify. You didn't cooperate. And he said, that's the only evidence I got that you here in prison. He said, you give me 2 years, ticket free, and I give you my word. I will personally request the governor to commute your sentence. Well, the MDOC changed this policy and said life mean life again, the act and the behavior and not being able to forgive. But I still hold myself accountable and responsible for having a firearm in that car the night the gentleman got killed. I also hold myself accountable for having left the scene of an argument and went around a corner and allowed that firearm to be taken out the trunk of the car that I was operating. I hold myself accountable for going back to that scene. I hold myself accountable for allowing one of those youths in the car to handle that gun, knowing that I and every other youth in that car had been intoxicated and that there had been a previous argument between the occupants of the vehicle and the individual that was killed. I hold myself responsible for that. And when I was in prison, I became aware of the harm that I had did. So I became, while I was in prison, just like I was a gang leader on the street, I became a leader in prison, but I became a different kind of leader. And I remind you, I was only a gang leader for a few years, but I was a leader among my peers in prison for decades. For decades. I took and taught law classes. After I taught myself, after I took advantage of taking and going to paralegal courses at Jackson Community College, and after I took and learned from other fellow inmates things about law, I began to take and put my own proposal into administrators and ask the prison administrators for the opportunity to be able to take and teach my fellow inmates. At the Mount Correctional Facility, I got an opportunity to do that. And one of the significant or most significant things as far as I'm concerned that the U.S. Supreme Court said is that most of the children that were sentenced to mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole are actually innocent of those sentences, not the crime, but the sentence. At the time of the U.S. Supreme Court decision, there was almost 3,000 children in this nation's prison. And we're only talking about those who were under 18. Since I've been home, I took and got into grad school at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. I'm now a graduate, and the place where I did my field work, which was the Detroit Justice Center, very dynamic law firm, movement attorneys. I am now an extern there and a member of their board of directory. And I'm very proud and grateful for that opportunity. This interview, understanding, is in support of pending legislation to abolish the possibility of even sentencing a child to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I hope to take and see this legislation passed here in my state, Michigan, so that we are no longer an outliner among the other states. There are 25 states presently that prohibit the sentencing a child to life in prison without the possibility of parole. We now see that there is support, bipartisan support for the legislation. Safe and Just Michigan has played a very significant role to take in, like they do in the case of most of the grassroots organizations here in Michigan. When we come up with policy ideas and so forth, they put it together in terms of how it can be presented to lawmakers, and they take and walk us through the halls of the state legislative house and introduce us to lawmakers. They brief us on who to talk to, where to go, etc. And so we are very much assisted in Lansing by Safe and Just Michigan, and we're very thankful for that. Remind you that 25 other states have already did what we asked in Michigan to do. When a child show that kind of harm is because it only been entered into the child, because no child is born bad. No child is born bad. No matter what you attribute, what accusation, whether it is valid or invalid, No child is born bad that you attribute to the parent. No child is born bad. If there's something in the child, it absorbed it once it came into this environment. And that's our responsibility. That's our collective responsibility. And taking and putting that away is not resolving the issue. It's only hiding the issue. It's only allowing it to fester. Prison is not the answer to everything. And we live in a democracy. It's definitely not the answer in a democracy. A democracy is a place where we should value freedom at all costs. We should value freedom. We need all of us to begin to advocate to each other, to be able to give each other grace, to be able to give each other a sense of mercy and forgiveness, even on your worst day. Even on your worst day. Learn to forgive, even on your worst day. Thank you.